Dude, appreciate you coming.
I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. I have kicked around the idea of doing something like this for a while, and just never felt like it was a good time or like I had much to say. But, you know, the more I kind of tinkered on it, I was like, you know, if I ever were to do something like this, you'd probably be the first person I would talk to.
I appreciate that.
And so I think it's funny because I called you and said that, and you're like, no, you should go on somebody else's podcast. I don't like the sound of my own voice. I'm like, well, I don't either. So you're stuck with me. So appreciate you coming out, man.
My pleasure, man.
Before we get too much into it, I do think it'd be cool just to kind of hear a little bit of your backstory, especially because you did the whole college football thing. And I think athletes tend to do well in this space. So what's the Austin January story?
Man, so we're going way back.
Way back.
Okay. Yeah, I played football at Abilene Christian University. Go Wildcats. And it's I think it teaches you a lot from a discipline perspective, and that goes well in any type of consulting role, sales role, where you want to have that accountability. Mm-hmm. And those are some of the things that I took from it that I apply in my everyday walk. And then from there, you just get so many relationships, and that's really how I got into the HCM space. Is right after that, started at ADP selling payroll. But that was a connection through Abilene Christian that I was able to get into there, which is pretty great.
Yeah, I don't think I knew that. Yeah, so that's one of the other reasons I wanted to have you on is I think you have a unique perspective on this industry because you've been in the HCM industry and specifically in the PEO industry, transitioned to the employee benefits world. Obviously, there's a lot of synergy between those two industries, but you've had the benefit of having a foot in each one at some point in time. So, like, how did you end up in the PEO space? And just walk me through the journey of when you got to the point where you decided to step out and do something different. Like, what did that all look like? Yeah,
that's a great question. Because I don't think I've ever left the HCM space. It just kind of just changed a little bit. And I would consider the same thing for PEO consultants as well. So for me, I started selling payroll. And then from there, it's like all the different add-on products. Well, maybe it's you're referring out to retirement specialists. And then it's going to be work comp and other insurances. And then, this is a great PEO solution. Let me learn about that. And that always kind of spoke to me growing up. Always a part of my parents were always part of like a smaller business. And so there was oftentimes we had no health insurance. We didn't have those type of things. So it was don't get sick. And that's how I kind of grew up. And then being able to get into a space where you could bring coin the term, the Fortune 500 benefits package down to the small market really appealed to me. And so I was just referring a lot out to from payroll, hey, you guys might make a good fit for PEO. And then from there, it was like, well, maybe I should sell PEO. Yeah. And then got into the PEO space.
What year was that?
That would have been into the PEO space?
Yeah.
2013, I think.
Okay. And then you did it for how many years?
I think not quite 3 years. I was just strictly PEO.
Okay.
And then I moved into the broker space.
Yep. And that's when you and I would have met.
Yeah, that's exactly whenever we met. A good long while ago, yeah.
So how did you, what made you take the jump from PEO to employee benefits specifically?
It was a lot of conversation. It was like almost a year recruiting process before I got over to the broker space. I thought brokers just play golf and spreadsheet stuff. They're not really helping people, and that's what I wanted to do.
And that's true, right? I
mean, for some,
well,
you still get across.
Not for guys like you, no.
Well, but I think it changed my passion a little bit because now I had that side of it, and I still had the passion for the small and emerging market. But at the time, it was still kind of that BUCA solution set for the small market. So it was traditional, fully insured solutions, or you go PEO and some of those type of things. Level funding started to kind of catch on. And for me, it was, how can I really help people? That's what the whole goal is. Yeah. And through that conversation, it made a lot of sense to me to become a broker because and at the time, that's what I was a broker. Okay. And hey, what do you have? What can we put you with? And then I kind of advanced into really being a full consultant. Maybe PEO is a good solution for you. Yeah. Okay, so you started talking about BUCA, level funded, PEO. I think I'm ready to go down the rabbit hole here if you are. Yeah. Educate me. Like, obviously I know what each of those is, but I think specifically what I'm interested in is explain level funding to me. Yeah. Level funding keeps the employer cost level throughout the entire plan year. but you get to have insights on the claims and understand where the claims are coming. And so you get a little bit deeper reporting.
Okay.
So it just puts you a little bit more in the driver's seat. It is a self-funded mechanism.
Okay.
So all the different regulations from a self-funded perspective are applied to you. You still have PCORI. You're still going to have the testing that you have to do. Make sure you're not discriminatory, where if you're fully insured, you can get away with some of those type of things. But it really just feels fully insured to the employer, which protects cash flow, not volatility from month to month, but then the potential reward on the back end. And there are some where you get 100% of your surplus account. Some it's going to be a 50-50, some is 2/3. And so.
And is this a relatively new funding arrangement, like last decade or so?
That's a good question.
At least I never saw, I mean, I've only been doing this for 9 years, but I feel like I never saw it my first 2 or 3 years. Started seeing it a little bit more kind of, late 2018, 2019. And then now it's like almost every small group I talk to is either with a PEO, level funded, or if they're fully insured, it's because no PEO or level funded carrier would take them. That's kind of what it seems like, at least.
Yeah, you kind of hit the nail on the head. It's been around for a decade or so, at least that I've known about it. It hasn't really gained as much traction in the smaller space.
Interesting.
Because it was a premium conversation. You have to have enough premium to make it make sense, because it's still stop loss.
Right.
But now there's different solutions. Cigna, I think, was one of the first that came out with it. It's really that's their solution, and they have specific and aggregate insurance built into it. Where now, because I think of the sharpness of underwriting, there's a lot of ag only products. Which obviously lowers your fixed cost, and so overall you have lower premiums. And there's a lot of network things, but with the advent of different AI underwriting models, with so many different things that are now coming down market, they can get a little bit sharper. And so now this A-rated paper is saying, well, we'll come down now. And I've talked to solutions level funded that'll go down to 2 employees.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
And it's just all about the risk.
Do you feel like that type of arrangement is something that a lot of small employers just aren't aware of? Or maybe, like, I don't know, I'm thinking about it from the perspective of a broker who walks into a group. Like, where do you feel like those groups maybe are uneducated or have gotten it wrong or have just been sold on the traditional Buca fully insured, that's kind of all there is out there for small groups?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Like, how do you advise a group in that position?
Well, it's a lot about education. And a lot of it's just not being brought down to that market. So to peel the onion back a little bit, so to speak, a lot of brokerage shops say, hey, if it's not going to generate our agency X amount of revenue, we don't really want to mess with it, right?
And is that a function of less revenue, but still tying up a lot of our internal bandwidth from an account management perspective? We just have to focus more up market?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
Yeah. It is just each, different agencies have different business models.
Makes sense.
Right? And some want to come down a little bit further. Some say, hey, you have to have X amount of lives for it to make sense for our model. That's perfectly fine. But I think a lot of it is just not approaching that marketplace, not approaching those 15 life groups, those 20 life groups with that particular type of solution. And if they are, it's typically from a broker who may not be as sophisticated in that area that you would like them to be. And so it's the easy button. Blue Cross Blue Shield, community rated, here's your rates.
They are what they are.
Yep.
Yep.
They're just not going out to the full market and understanding what it is.
When I'm talking to brokers, that's always been my thought is, hey, these smaller groups, they're going to take up as much of your time, in some cases more of your time, than maybe your larger groups would. And so economically, does it make a ton of sense for you to spend time on those groups? Probably not. However, a lot of them are closely held relationships, or it's like, I mean, small business is the backbone of America. Like, you don't just want to toss those guys to the curb, right? So they need an advocate. And I've always thought, and not in every case, but in a lot of cases, man, those are the perfect groups for a PEO for a lot of reasons. One, because they may get access to some different health insurance options. But even aside from that, just from an economics perspective on the broker side, it offers you the ability to retain a client without having to actively service them on a day-to-day basis. So I've always thought there'd be a ton of synergy in, like, really that, probably 10 to 30-ish space. Of that being the window where it's like probably too small for a lot of broker shops to want to deal with. PEOs will ride them all day, every day.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I don't understand a lot of people see kind of PEO solution as a competition. I never really understood that. Now, different PEOs have different models. Hey, we're not going to be nimble. It's here's the full sandbox. You got to be in all of it. Mm-hmm. Others can say, well, if you have an advisor that you want on the 401k side, keep them. If you have a great medical program, you can keep. We can carve that out. So it's also about education on the broker side too. A lot of them just don't know.
Yeah,
they've never had that experience. They've been taught, hey, they're going to take your business, and
which is fair. I mean, PEOs take business from brokers. I've taken brokers' business before, not necessarily intentionally, but like it just happens through the course of business.
But this is the best solution for the employer, and I think that's where we all need to get to is what's best for you, Mr. Employer, Miss Employer, not necessarily the sales guy or the agency.
Well, and I think there's a way to do it in a manner that's good for everybody. It should ultimately be good for the employees because they're the ones receiving and paying for the insurance. It should be good for the employer because they're receiving a host of services that help simplify their back office. It should be good for the broker because they retain a client, help reduce premiums, providing value to that client by introducing a PEO. It's good for the PEO because obviously they pick up a new piece of business. So like maybe I just have rose-colored glasses a little bit, but I've always thought you're right. Brokers and PEOs can view one another as adversarial. I don't think that things are trending that way, though. I see a lot of PEOs. I mean, I know of PEOs who are exclusively marketed through brokers. They don't have a direct sales force. And so that's like one end of the spectrum. There's the other end where it's like we only do direct sales. We don't work with brokers at all. I would say most brokers or most PEOs are probably somewhere in the middle. Yeah. Where they're like, hey, we're going to have a direct sales force, but we want to have a strong broker presence as well. Because I think not doing both of those things, you're just leaving crumbs on the table.
Yeah, I agree completely. And then I think that's definitely the movement in the PEO space.
Yeah.
On the broker side of things, right? It depends on what type of agency you're working with, whether that's their model, and it could be, hey, anything under 50 lives, you're just going to send it to Hayden, type thing. But to really understand and leverage the solution and be a true partner with that employer, I think that's where a guy like me comes in. Well, what exactly is your setup? What are your goals?
Yeah, so let me ask you that. So when you walk in to a group, you're meeting with them for the first time, like what is the Austin January method? Like how are you diagnosing problems, getting a sense of their current scenario, their ideal state? Like what does that conversation even look like?
Man, a lot of listening, I think more than anything, just being a professional question asker. And once you've been in the space a good long time and you understand the different solutions that you can potentially explore, it's really just asking those questions. What are you doing now? Mm-hmm. Are you in 12 states with 20 employees? Well, that's a lot of litigation and a lot of different laws and things between each one of them. What is your solution for that? Are you trying to run more lean internally? What are your goals? And I think that's kind of the starting point. With a lot of organizations, especially in kind of today's climate, payroll is always like your number one expense, unless you're in the bullion or some other kind of industry like that. Well, how are you integrating with that person all the way from the pre-hire to post-retire? And I think that's really the conversation that I try to have with them is what is your goals from a human capital management perspective? And being in a leader position and actually having people that report to me and trying to understand that, it's a lot of intangible items that an employer is presenting to somebody. You have your Slack account and you have your email and just a bunch of things that you can't really touch and feel and take home with you, including your benefits. And so that is oftentimes what I see is being overlooked is the expectation is Amazon. I want to be able to log on to my employer's website and be able to do self-service and do the things that I want to do. And I think some employers, depending again which industry it is and kind of your employee profile, how are you accommodating that? And that's where I start off at is how are you communicating to your employees? Right? You just all gather them up at 6 a.m. and saying, here's the new shiny thing. Are you doing some push messaging? How are you integrating with your employee peoples? Yeah.
Then, okay, taking that a step further, specifically as it relates to benefits, when you're asking questions around, hey, what are your goals? What are your aspirations? How are you communicating with employees? At what point in the process are you having the conversations around mechanisms like BUCA, self-funded, level-funded, PEO? Is that early in the process, or is it more of a situation where you're like, hey, prior to really doing any of that, I want to be your guy. I want to be your agent of record. And absent of that, it may not make sense for me to go shop the market for you because your current broker can do that.
Yeah.
How does that work?
That's a really good question too. So when the ACA passed, all brokers, if you take the same census and you go to the same market,
I don't think people know this.
I don't think so either.
No.
You get the same pricing.
Yes.
So if it's a census with 50 people and I submit it to Blue Cross Blue Shield, but brokers B, C, D, and F all do the same thing, we're all getting the same rates.
Yep.
So
you're just duplicating efforts for the same result.
Yeah. But it's the buyer's mentality,
yep.
right? If I have more people shopping,
the more I send it out to, the more some guy may find something unique.
Yeah, exactly.
Doesn't work that way.
No, but so the way that I go about it is really understanding what your goals are. And hey, I just want to be compliant. That's it. What's the least amount of money that I can spend as an employer? Be compliant, and let's keep it moving. And others are, we want to offer a fantastic benefit package. What can we do? And so there's other conversations of like, well, where do your people live, right? We can glean some information from the census. All your employees are within 3 zip codes here in the Metroplex. So maybe you don't need coverage in Colorado, right? And maybe we look at an ACO. Maybe you look at maybe a smaller network, not necessarily an HMO, but something that has better contracts where
like a Texas Health Network or something.
That's a great example, right? First Health, something like that. And so that's typically a lot of the conversations I'll have with them. Is what's your goal with this, right? If it's a technology firm that's wanting to recruit and retain and do all those different type of things, then you're probably going to want a low or no deductible plan, all the different bells and whistles, those type of things. And others, they're just, can we get by with a mech?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting the spectrum of employers out there and mentalities, and I'm sure you're in the same boat as I am, where a lot of times you ask, well, what's the goal? The initial response is, well, we just want the best care at the lowest price possible. It's like, well, okay, yeah, everybody wants that, of course. Or really what they're saying is we want to reduce our premiums as much as possible. And you're like, well, best way to do that is don't offer insurance at all. Then you have no premiums, right? So the better question is, okay, like what's behind that? Like say you do save 20%, save $100,000. Like, well, what does that actually do for you?
Yeah.
Is that the next, you need to hire a new, sales guy, and now you have the budget to do that? Is it you've grown your office space? Well, now you have the budget to expand. Like, because I think absent of getting to the root of it, it's like, well, of course you want to save money on your benefits, but if that doesn't actually accomplish something else for you, to what end?
Yeah, I mean, EBITDA. Right?
Yeah, it's true.
You're gonna make more money if you're more profitable, and that's really what I've seen a lot recently. I mean, I don't know how far back, but at least from COVID, things like that, is really running leaner in your OpEx. How can we cut costs in that paradigm? And
don't get me started on that.
I know.
I mean, that's our whole business model.
Right.
Is why build it internally where you can outsource it to a professional at a fraction of the cost.
Yeah.
I do think that outsourcing in general, not just PEO, I think it is becoming much more widely accepted. I think it's maybe a generational thing where guys of our demographic are saying, I have this widget, I do this thing. Why would I do anything but put all of my efforts and energy into that? Anything else operationally, accounting, IT, benefits, HR, etc., outsource it. Just let somebody else do it.
Yeah, I'm kind of a fan of that as well. Do what the goal of outsourcing is so that you can focus on what you are good at.
Core competencies.
Whatever your widget is that you're manufacturing, or whatever service is that you're providing, you want to be able to spend all your efforts on that. I think where it's the control aspect, which I guess would kind of be one of the things that would be in the con column from a perspective of why would I outsource or PEO or things like that, is I don't have that control over the different parts of my business that I want to. Even in my business, I came across the same thing. Hey, I can probably get a third-party company to build out my employee nav groups and all that kind of good stuff, but I don't control it. And so
makes sense.
That's one of those things where, hey, this is a hot start. We need it in 72 hours.
Yeah.
I can't really put that pressure on this other organization.
So that's the decision spectrum then is, on the one end you have ultimate control, but also ultimate responsibility. And on the other end, it's the opposite, where it's you may have less control, but no responsibility. I might be able to wash my hands of these things. And there's probably a healthy medium somewhere in the middle where it's, hey, we want to offload ourselves as much of the responsibility and accountability as possible while still remaining some semblance of control and autonomy in there.
It's always in the middle, right?
Yeah.
That's where you, I think striking that balance, and it really is the employer kind of life cycle. Where are they at within their business? Mm-hmm. Do they want to spend $80,000 getting an HR professional to come in and do all these different type of things, or would you rather just share the liability and have seasoned professionals that they've done it, so they know.
And listen, I'm the ultimate hypocrite because I professionally say outsource, 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 and then personally it's like I mow my own lawn. You know, like my wife for years has been like, dude, just like pay a neighborhood kid $20 to come do it. And I'm like, yeah, but like I do it this certain kind of way, and like I know how I like my stripes, and like I get a little bit of a tan, and like I'm just a control freak is really what it is. And I'm a control freak, and I'm hyper frugal. And so I'm like, the $20, like that's kind of in reality it's like I probably just need to outsource it. But so I empathize with business. I say that on like a micro level. We're talking about something as trivial as my lawn. If I were thinking about my actual business, outsourcing what outside of my family is probably like one of my most important things in my life. Like I think that's a big ask. And I think as a PEO salesman, I'm always like, just outsource it. But then when I put myself in their shoes, I'm like, no, that's a big deal to ask somebody to outsource that, you know?
I think that's really good perspective. And I think that's something that a lot of leaders struggle with, especially in the markets that you're wanting to serve, right? That small market, that smaller middle market, they were the ones up all night doing whatever the it was to make sure that their business strived and succeeded. And so it's such an emotional attachment to it where, hey, if I give up this one thing, is it going to work like I need it to? Is it going to mess up the rest of my vertical integrations and everything else that I have going on? And so I think that's something that as you continue to scale, as you continue to grow within your business life cycle, and you reach out, maybe you have different mentors, or you're involved with different types of groups with leaderships, executive coaching, that you understand the value of outsourcing. And I also think a big portion of it is liability. And that's one of the things that whenever I'm recommending a PEO, it's a liability shift is huge, especially in this landscape.
So let me ask you this. From your perspective as a broker who owns client relationships, probably has guys like me, other PEOs, other payroll providers, HCM providers, knocking on your door saying, hey, introduce me to your clients. I'm always curious from your perspective, what are the reasons why you really would want to partner with somebody like that? And then what are maybe some of the drawbacks of not to put words in your mouth, but like one that I've always perceived is if I introduce this guy to my client and he messes something up, now I look bad. So like, just give me the kind of perspectives of what are reasons you would partner, maybe more specifically with a PEO. And then from the broker world, what are some of the drawbacks to making those introductions?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's with any solution that you recommend, but specifically the drawback would be, do they screw up, right? I mean, and
do I get egg on my face?
Right, and then you're the guy that put that solution in place, and it's not working like it needs to. We're going to find a different guy, right? If I'm interviewing a new candidate of somebody to present to a client, that makes sense. A lot of it comes down to technology, their leadership. Are they actively investing in this area of their business? What's their goal of market share? Do they have a master plan? How's it performing? Some of the other items, are they nimble? Are there certain SIC codes that they're not going to work with because of risk? Do they have the nimbleness to move kind of from the PEO to an ASO model? Or if as they continue to grow, can you do payroll only, but stay within the same HRS environment? A lot of those type of conversations come up, and just evaluating. I like to get a customer testimony, but it's typically, it's my best friend's wife's company, and they do a really good job. It's always a great testimony. But those type of things kind of come to mind. A lot of it's on the technology portion of it. Does it all integrate with all the back-end systems? Because they can show you a really nice deck. Hey, this is how this works, and this works, and this works. But come to find out, it's a bunch of Band-Aids on the back end because, well, we're actually upgrading our software to this new deal, and we're actually changing our 401k platform.
Are there specific points of integration, or I guess let me phrase it this way. So like, I'm thinking from your perspective, you probably have benefits enrollment tools that you prefer to use with your carriers, right? How much of a hindrance is that when PEO comes in and says, well, you can't use that anymore? Is that a big deal or not really?
It really depends on the client. Yeah, it really depends. Because there are some non-PEO, just HCM providers that are the same way.
Okay.
You got to use ours or nobody's.
Really? Okay.
And so then you get well versed in those. But from my perspective, when I'm talking to an employer, insurance is a very emotional product. And it's oftentimes confusing, doesn't work like you want, costs a lot. And so to have the right communication platform and how they're using it, how do they get introduced to what their benefits package is so huge to me. That if we're going to be partnering with another HCM company or a PEO and they're saying, hey, we're going to be an admin, we don't need your stuff, fantastic. We want to have some sort of broker level access to it. We want to make sure it includes all the different things that we want there to be included. Let's say it's a self-funded plan, but we have a carved out PBM where it requires some different communication on where prior auths are going to go to, who you need to contact in that regard. I want to be able to include all the right information on that platform. Because if the employee is in it, that's their experience. They're going into one platform. Can we make sure that all of the information is available to them very easily? The provider lookup links are there. How can we make sure that they get access to their 401k platform? How can we make sure they get access to their FSA accounts? All of that just needs to be integrated. And if the HCM company PEO is doing that on their platform natively, and the employer is happy with it, the employee seems that they can actually navigate it, and that's the closest thing you'll get to them actually touching their insurance. Right? Then it's going to be good.
Yep. Okay. We're going to take a little break. Let's get some coffee.
Yeah, let's do it.
And we'll come back.
So tell me about, what are some of the reasons why you as a broker would not want to partner specifically with a PEO? Like, what are some of the deterrents to that?
Claims data.
Okay.
That's the number.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, number one deal, man. Because then you can't really advise. If you're fully insured, at least here in Texas, you can get tier 1 and tier 2 data. Who are your large claimants? Depending on the carrier, you can probably get some RX information. If you're in a PEO and you want to then explore your options, you're flying blind. And no one wants to fill out a personal health questionnaire.
So it sounds as if transparency, specifically as it relates to claims, is big in controlling costs long term.
Yeah, that's the number one drawback of a PEO. I think the second is going through that whole shopping every year, every 2 years, going and jumping to a different PEO to get that new business discount and all that. That's a big drawback because it's similar technology, you could say, but it's still a completely new implementation system. And if you have a complicated payroll, developing all those different things, if you already have the benefits carved out, let's say, and you're moving from platform to platform, it's just all of that implementation process is difficult, and it can cause a lot of frustration. I had a client that moved from it was a big PEO being extremely overcharged. It was to like a percentage of their payroll. And so it was one of my best case studies, like $165,000 in annual savings. And it massively improved their benefit offerings. But the time clocks weren't working with this payroll-only solution. And the implementation didn't go quite well. Then the codes weren't set up correctly. And so there was a lot of headaches throughout that year to where it's like, man, let's just go back PEO. And so I advised them, and they went back that way.
Interesting. Did they go to the same PEO, or did they go to
they went different.
Interesting.
Yeah, they went different. It's all about the pricing model. There's still a lot that are very opaque, and that's, I would say, is the other drawback of PEO, if you don't know what your actual cost centers are. And so I've done hundreds of, hey, do you know what you're spending? And a lot of times they don't.
Almost always no.
They never do.
No.
To be able to understand what is my work comp class code, and rates per class code. What is my state unemployment rate per state? What is my actual processing of payroll fee and HR fee and everything else that may be included in there? Just to distill it down to that is huge for employers because they actually know where the cost centers are, how they can grow, things like that. And it seems like that's one of the drawbacks of PEO is let's make it gray. Everything's going good for you, right? We're just gonna collect the money. You don't worry about nothing. It's all gonna work out for you. So I'd say number 2.
I cannot tell you how many times I've had conversations with people where we're looking at an invoice and they have absolutely no idea what it means. And I'm being a bit facetious, but because there's some really sharp people out there. But
yeah,
I would say I don't think it's unfair to say overwhelmingly most people that are with a PEO probably don't have as good of a handle on their current costs as they think they do. Because there's so many different places a PEO can bury it. And the good PEOs will be really transparent with you. We'll tell you here's exactly what we're going to charge. We're not hiding anything. There are some PEOs who just have a different business philosophy, and we'll package things in such a way where it's maybe a bit more difficult, intentionally difficult to get an understanding of where the bodies are buried. Not that there's necessarily anything right or wrong with either of those methods, but I do hear pretty consistently from clients that are in maybe a more bundled pricing model. It's just really frustrating because it's like, hey, if you're going to charge us that much, that's fine. You're a good company. Just be able to justify what our cost is. Because if you're as good as you say you are, you should be able to justify it. And so, I don't know. Not that there's a perfect way to price PEO, because I think the other challenge is if you get 10 quotes from 10 different PEOs, they're all going to look wildly different as far as the way that they price, package, percentage, flat fee, bundled, unbundled. These 2 things are bundled, but these ones are not. There is no consistent methodology to pricing of PEO. And I would imagine it can be infuriating to a prospective buyer.
I think you're exactly right. And it's, I think because they're really smart people that are running PEOs and developing those pricing models. And especially if, hey, we're going to keep your administrative costs the same. Everything else is going to stay the same, but we're actually going down 2 points on your medical. They're going to renew quick, right? It's the easy button. But nothing is good or bad except by comparison, right? And so when I have those conversations, -2.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Dude, I have a group, they just left my pipeline. I didn't end up getting the business, but the conversation started. I'm like, hey, why am I here right now? Like, well, we just think it's healthy every few years to take bids. Totally fair. Makes sense. It probably is a healthy endeavor. Tell me about your current PEO. They're like, well, we actually just got a great renewal. It was only 2.5%. And my immediate gut reaction was, well, I'm not winning this one. They just got a low increase. They're going to stick around. But what was interesting, when I looked at the renewal, you know why they got a 2.5%? Because their rates were like double national averages.
Wow.
Their employee, so I can't remember what the deductible was, but let's say it was a $1,500 deductible plan. Their employee only rate was like $1,100. To insure an entire family was like $4,600. So I'm like, well, yeah, you got a 2.5% increase, but like the analogy I gave them is like, that would be like a 700-pound person saying, I only gained 2.5% pounds this year. It's like, well, you're so big, that's a lot of pounds on like a gross scale. So like we had that conversation. Of course, they ended up sticking with the incumbent anyway because it's the easy button. I get it. But I think there is this misnomer of like, well, like my renewal was good this year. It's like, well, good compared to what?
Yeah.
Good compared to your current? Because I would have bet if they would have actually gone through an underwriting process, looked at something like a level funded, I would not be shocked if their plans didn't get cut in half.
Did they get quotes from you in your master plan?
I don't think we got far enough to get there, no. But yeah.
Well, because they could have leveraged it, right? They say, hey, Mr. PEO that I'm currently with, here's another solution. I need you to drop your rates, which is another viable strategy.
Totally.
If you're currently in that environment.
Totally.
You love the PEO. You don't really want to move, but you want less price. Calling a bunch of dudes like me or you, and then, hey, well.
Take it back to the current.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, I hate when they do that, but like I get it.
Yeah, it's business.
It works. Yeah, I mean, I think the rule of 72, you know what that is?
I do know what this is.
It's like an investing thing. So it's the idea that the rate at which your investment doubles is basically you take the number 72 and divide it by how much compounding interest you're getting on it. So like if you invest in a fund and that fund is getting a 10% return year over year, well, after 7.2 years, your portfolio will have doubled. You can apply that same thing to health insurance. So it's like whatever your rates are, if they're increasing 8% every year, 8 goes into 72. I don't know, I'm an Aggie, so my math's not great. Call it 8.5 years.
It's like 9.
Every 8.5 years, your rates are going to double. So it's kind of like the frog getting boiled in water, where it's like, well, you just get a 6% this year and a 8% this year and a set. But you look up and it's like, well, less than a decade later, your rates have doubled based on what they were originally. And sometimes the only way to break that model is to leave that carrier or do a different funding arrangement or I don't know. Do you see that in your world at all?
Well, I do things a little bit differently.
Okay.
And I know that's the old number. That's why I didn't want to be a broker at first, right? It's because you just spreadsheet things or just keep it with. And it's the same thing that we're talking about internal operations, running lean. Well, a lot of agencies want to do the same thing, and it takes a lot of effort to move to a different carrier. So is it really worth the 1.5, 2 points, right? We'll just keep it as it is.
Okay.
Where I have a completely different paradigm where you're going out to market every year. We have to keep everybody honest because it's gone out of control. And so I do agree with you. If you just keep things the same, don't ask questions, in a decade or 7.2 years, you're going to be doubled. But I think that's the advent of a lot of really innovative solutions coming into the marketplace and saying, hey, well, let's go and see this level funded solution. And when you actually have the claims data, when you have all that information, it's a lot different. Because, hey, well, you have 12 cancers. You spent a lot of money on insurance. Here's your loss ratio. Here's how much was medical. Here's RX. Here's some things that we could do to curb that. But you have to go into a different model to do so. And that's also something that I get pushback on is like, we're not ready to go into a captive for whatever these reasons that they may think, right? And it's completely okay. Just so you know, you're going to spend more money and the carrier's going to make more profit because you want to stay in a little bit more simplified solution. Okay. That's completely okay.
So let me throw a curveball at you. You walk into a group. Group is on a PEO. I'm curious how you would handle this situation. Do you, I think I probably know the answer to this, is your goal at that point, how do I break them out of a PEO? Or are there alternatives that you might propose to them? I'll leave it at that. I'll try not to spoon feed you the answer that I think a lot of brokers would probably say.
Yeah, so I guess in this scenario, how did I get the meeting? Right, that's the first
dealer's choice.
Right,
you cold called them.
Cold call them, and they're like, "Yeah, come in and talk to me about whatever your widget is." Right. My first goal would be to understand what their goals are and to listen. Again, going back to the first.
Let's play this out hypothetically.
Yeah.
My goal is I want cheaper insurance.
Yeah, cheaper insurance relative to what?
What I'm currently paying.
Right. This is okay. Great. We'll throw some spaghetti on the wall and see if it sticks.
Okay.
Right. That's one approach that you can take. Tell me about your employees, right? If it's a smaller company, they're probably going to be a little more intimate. They know their guys and gals a little bit better. And if you got a bunch of folks that are, a little bit more mature in their years, maybe you have some known health issues, things of that nature. Maybe there is no solution for you. Maybe you're in the very best solution that you could possibly be in. No shame in looking under the hood and seeing what can be there. But my goal is not going in there specifically to break them out of that PEO.
Okay.
Because it could be the best solution. And it could be that we just need to have some alternatives to leverage towards that PEO. Because I've had that situation come, hey, we're on a master plan, we got a 17%. Well, Cigna's coming out here and they're only 9% above your current. Can you guys do better? And I've had that conversation on behalf of PEO folks before.
Yeah.
So that's not my goal, is to take them out of a PEO. Honestly, my goal is to do what's best for them and their goals.
Yeah. I think you're probably in the minority on that. So here's what I typically see is broker finds himself in front of a client, finds out that client is with a PEO. The immediate mentality is, how do I break them out of a PEO?
Yeah.
And my suspicion would be that what is primarily motivating that, best case scenario is they want to do what's best for the client. Worst case scenario is they're just looking for a payday.
Yeah, it's their wallet.
It's probably somewhere in between or a mixture of all the things, right? But I think what ends up happening is they get so hyper-focused on how do I peel the screw out of a PEO, specifically for the health insurance, and I'll just partner with some payroll-only solution or HCM solution over here, and they'll be fine. I think that can work. I'm not saying that isn't the answer. I think for a broker to view that as the only answer or the primary answer is not ideal. Again, I'm biased in thinking this, but what I've seen happen, actually we had a group like this a long time ago that we worked together. You probably don't remember them, but they left PEO, went HCM only. Things didn't go well because they didn't realize, well, man, when we have an unemployment claim, like now we're the ones who have to deal with it. We're actually the fiduciary on our 401k now. We didn't realize that. Maintaining a safe workplace, man, our PEO actually helped us out a lot with that. They wrote a safety manual, they did OSHA logs. We had a sensitive employee issue. We needed to terminate them, but we weren't really sure how to handle it. And then they filed a, wrongful termination claim against us. And so there's like all these other things that a PEO does. And unfortunately, whether they would tell me this to my face or not, I don't know. But I think a lot of brokers still view PEOs as taking small groups, putting them in a large group health plan, and providing payroll on the side. That's kind of like what they think of us as.
I agree with you.
There's so much, like we do so much more than that. Like I wish I could show you the people sitting on this side of the wall and like the stuff that they're doing for clients every day. So I say all that to say, like, they get hyper focused on how do I peel this group out of a PEO. And I've always thought, hey, if there's dissatisfaction with their current PEO, the answer might not be exit PEO altogether. It's find a different PEO partner for them.
Very well could be, yep.
And maybe that means keeping them on the PEO master plan. Maybe it means carving it out and still allowing the PEO to do all of the HR components, technology components, while being on a level funded platform or whatever you find is best for them. How are we doing on time? Yep. Okay, let's take another 30-second coffee break and then we'll wrap this thing up. Sound good?
Yeah, sounds good.
Cool. So let me ask you this. Final thoughts as it relates to anything employee benefits, small business, PEO, non-PEO. Just if you had like a soapbox for 3 minutes and you could say anything you wanted to say that was important and dear to your heart, what would you speak to?
That's a
loaded question.
That's a big, my first inclination goes to, understanding that there's something bigger out there for all of us. And what master do you serve? And taking a hard look internally, what is your goal? What's your paradigm? And what's leading that paradigm? And ensuring that you're in line with whatever that is. And it's not just yourself. That would be kind of the bigger thing that I would go with. And I'm very hopeful and I'm bullish on the way that I see a lot of these industries that we've touched on going, the direction, whether it's PEO or PBM or TPAs or other advocacy services and brokers alike.
Yeah.
I've seen tremendous amounts of education into the HCM and the broker space that you didn't see 10 years ago, which I think is huge. I think you're seeing a lot of innovative solutions coming to the marketplace that I love. And I think what I see, or at least that's what I surround myself with, is a true mission to help. I think people understand that the costs are getting out of control with healthcare. I think people understand that it's increasingly difficult to manage people, and that sometimes you can't do it on your own, and that you don't want to be a jack of all trades. And maybe it may be the best to look at who can you partner with that's a master of one or two of them. And that's, I guess, the thing that I would want to part with is it's bigger than you. It's not just about your wallet. And I do think there's a big disconnect from top performers within the sales space or within the broker space and the $14 manufacturer worker. And that's where I came from. That's what I love. And I still go to all the open enrollment meetings. I sit down with individuals, and it's, these drugs are getting out of control. How do you control this cost? Well, the surgery, I could do the surgery, but I couldn't get the physical therapy afterwards because our plan does this and this on a prospective basis. And so that would be my final thing is it's a bigger solution than just you. And make sure you're in line with whatever master it is that you decide to serve. Make sure that they're moral, that they're righteous, and that you're in line with that. That would be my final thoughts.
It's a good word.
Yeah.
I don't know any better way to end it than there.
Yeah.
Appreciate you coming on, man.
Yeah.
Guest number
Absolutely.
one. It's all downhill from here, probably.
I doubt it. I doubt it. Yeah,
Awesome, man.
Hey,
Well,
dude,
love
you're
you.
the man.
Appreciate you coming on.
Appreciate it, dude.